Hi, Neil. It's good to be back. As I mentioned in my last video, I wasn't going to let a number of years pass this time around before you see me again. Today, I have another new Apple product to talk about, the Apple Watch Series 7. I've been wearing this device for the past few days, and I want to talk about some of my initial impressions. The Apple Watch business is different from the iPhone and iPad business. The vast majority of people buying an Apple Watch are buying it for the first time. They've never worn an Apple Watch. Accordingly, I think a lot of people are going to want to know, what is Apple doing on the wrist? They are so far ahead of the competition that in many ways, we are in uncharted territory. The Apple Watch Series 7 actually ends up being a little bit more controversial than a lot of people were thinking. The rumor mill was confident Apple was going to extend the design language found with iPhone and iPad and announce an Apple Watch with flat edges. Instead, Apple unveiled an Apple Watch Series 7 display with curved edges. This led some people to think that this is a placeholder, something that Apple rushed out just to have something new in front of the holidays. Nothing could be further from the truth. I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. I was pretty impressed with this device. Let's jump right into it with the unboxing. It's been fascinating to watch the evolution in Apple Watch packaging over the years. In many ways, it reminds me of the Apple Watch itself. When Apple launched this device in 2015, they had to rethink a lot of things. How do you sell technology for the wrist? And packaging played a very big first part in that. This is your initial impression of the device. And Apple was really concerned that people wouldn't necessarily think of this as a little computer. Instead, this is a piece of fashion. This is something that you want to be seen wearing in public. And so Apple Watch packaging has always been very important. Now, if you've been using the Apple Watch for a number of years, you will notice this is a pretty slim box. This is one of the first Apple Watches. I can just barely fit this into the screen. It was massive. And some of you probably even recall how this came inside the Apple Watch box. But here is the Series 7. So this is the green aluminum case. It's a brand new color. Actually, Apple has a number of new colors for the Apple Watch Series 7. So let's jump into this. So we'll go in the back. Pretty simple here. So just two unfolds. One of the first things that jumps out at me is this portrayal of the Series 7. It's a little bit different than if you compare this to the Series 6. In some ways, you can almost make out the screen a little bit better because you have that white background. And then underneath this, you have the watch band. Now, all previous watch bands do work with the Series 7. So I think a lot of people are going to be relieved about this. So this is the Clover Sport Band. We won't open that in this video. So we'll take this. And then in the back, we have two little tabs. So this is very similar to the iPhone, where you don't have any plastic wrapping. Just two little things pop out. So it's a little bit tricky here getting this box off, but here we go. And so we have designed by Apple in California, like usual. And so the only thing in here is the USB-C charging cable. There's no power adapter. That is what Apple did last year as well. It did not include the power adapter. That's one reason why the packaging can be so much thinner. We have the case itself. The sizes, this is the 45 millimeter. The other option is 41 millimeter. These are slightly larger than the Series 6. Series 6 comes in 40 millimeter and 44 millimeter. And here's a better view of that green color. My first impression of this is I like how it's not a bright green. It's a muted green in a way. It reminds me very much like the premium iPhone colors versus maybe say the lower end iPhone colors where it's more about brightness than anything else. And then when you're comparing this to the Series 6, here's the blue. This is the new color last year. It's very similar in which it is somewhat muted. When you wear it on your wrist, the way it kind of just sits there, you don't notice it too much in terms of the color. And so that's one reason why I think if you're really unsure about the color, in some ways it almost matters more what bands you like, what bands you'll probably end up wearing with the Apple Watch. And then, well, that's it for packaging. So again, very similar. Let's see what we have here. We'll talk about that shortly. So these are the instructions. So pretty self-explanatory here. And then we just put it all back in order. This is the Apple Watch Series 7 unboxing. Now, I had said that I wasn't going to unbox the actual Apple Watch band, but I think some people may be interested in how the Clover Sport Band looks next to the Apple Watch Series 7, the green aluminum. And so let me take out. And this is another example of how that green really is muted. To the eye, it almost looks like it's like a version of a black, like a black green, a very, very dark green. And again, I think that actually is a good thing. I'm not sure if if you take this green, put it in the watch case, I don't think it would look right. This is a piece of jewelry. That's how Apple treats the Apple Watch. This is something that you have to feel comfortable wearing, and more importantly, you have to feel comfortable being seen wearing this. But I think it's a pretty interesting combination. Apple Watch Series 7 marketing is anchored around a larger screen, and for good reason. Much to my surprise, reducing the display borders by 40% gives the Series 7 a completely different kind of Apple Watch experience. Instead of using the Series 7's larger screen, it's 20% larger than the Series 6 to include more text and information, Apple leveraged the additional screen real estate to make buttons and text larger. This was a smart decision. Instead of having Series 7 owners spend more time looking at their wrist, the larger screen makes it easier to quickly gather information and not get lost in the watch. A great example of this is looking at the following two watch faces. So here, the Series 7 is on the left, and the 20% larger display versus the Series 6 on the right is noticeable. But now look at the Series watch face. Look how those tabs are larger. It makes it easier to use. It's not that there's more information being crammed onto the screen. Instead, what we do see, it makes it easier just to look at it at a glance and then look away. One way of describing the Apple Watch's screen size changes over the years is that the Series 4 went after low-hanging fruit. There was value found in simply fitting more stuff on a bigger screen. The Series 7 screen, which ends up being 50% larger, more than 50% larger than the Series 3, feels like the refinement step, focusing more on the finer things, like larger font and click areas, which end up having a larger impact on daily usage. The calculator app is a great example of this, where it's just simply easier to press those numbers than previous Apple Watches. In this comparison, we have the Series 6 on the left and the Series 7 on the right. And it may not seem like there's a big difference between the two, but just a little bit goes a long way in terms of making it easier to use that calculator app. For the first time, Apple included a full-size keyboard on Apple Watch. 2 words, scary good. I was impressed with Apple's slide-to-text technology, which relies on machine learning to predict what I'm typing. Heading into the Series 7, my view is that tapping or sliding on an Apple Watch screen to write messages or emails didn't make much sense. Instead, dictation was the way forward. That idea hasn't completely gone away from me. It's still faster to dictate messages on the wrist instead of typing. However, using voice for dictation has its limitations, namely when it comes to privacy. It's just not practical or useful to use voice to dictate messages when in meetings or public settings. By including a built-in full-size keyboard for the first time, third-party options were previously available. Apple has essentially given the Apple Watch a new user input. One additional note about the screen. Similar to how the Series 7's larger screen jumped out at me, the 70% brighter always-on screen was also noticeable. To the user's eye, it pretty much seems like the Apple Watch screen has the same brightness, regardless of one's wrist position. With the Series 6, I found myself needing to tap the screen when in the always-on state, and not in a direct line of sight since it wasn't bright enough. In this example, the Series 7 on the right, you could clearly see that workout screen, it's just simply brighter. Turning to battery life, thanks to an updated charging architecture and fast-charging USB-C cable, I was able to charge the Apple Watch Series 7 from 0% to 82% in 45 minutes. That is favorable to Apple's 80% battery charge in 45 minutes claim. As for the Series 7 versus Series 6, I achieved about 25 to 30% faster charging. Apple has been following an all-day battery life strategy for Apple Watch. Instead of removing watch features to extend battery life to 2 to 3 days, Apple has strived to have Apple Watch battery life last as close to a full day as possible without the wearer needing a quick boost midday. For the most part, Apple has been successful with that objective. As someone who has worn an Apple Watch daily for the past 6 years, the Series 7 is up there with the Series 4 as being the most noteworthy upgrade to date. It's that good. That may come off as surprising given the lack of new features found with the Series 7. However, quality always trumps quantity when it comes to new features. The primary reason for the Series 7 receiving such a high honor is that a larger screen plays a very big role in my day-to-day Apple Watch experience. The wrist is among some of the most valuable real estate for computing, and a larger Apple Watch screen takes advantage of that premium real estate. At the same time, Apple's ongoing dedication to Apple Watch's rectangular design heritage is appreciated. Apple could certainly go in different directions with Apple Watch case design, but the company's continued commitment to positioning Apple Watch as a general computing device ends up being satisfied with a screen designed to display text and information. We'll conclude with a little bit of the big picture. As I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, the Apple Watch business is very different from the iPhone and iPad business. It's not about upgrading, but instead bringing new users into the fold. According to Apple, approximately 75% of people buying an Apple Watch are buying their first Apple Watch. That means that when it comes to the Series 7, people aren't necessarily going to compare it to the Apple Watch Series 6 or even the Series 3. Instead, they're going to compare it to non-consumption, not having any Apple Watch on the wrist. In this video, we did talk a little bit about how the Series 7 compares to the Series 6. That's not so much for consumers to worry about, but instead that's for determining if Apple Watch is moving forward with the Apple Watch. I have to say, the Series 7, it really is impressive. It makes the other Apple Watches seem antiquated in a way. But for most people, that's not going to be the driving factor. Instead, the buying equation is going to be, do I want additional utility on the wrist? Along those lines, the Series 3 could actually be a pretty good Apple Watch for a lot of people. The Series 7, though, I do think will probably represent the bulk of Apple Watch sales. Going forward, Apple's competing with a few things. First, they're definitely competing with non-consumption. Their goal is to convince more people who have nothing on their wrist to start wearing an Apple Watch. 2, I think eventually the Apple Watch is going to start competing a little bit with other wearables. We're talking face wearables, even wireless headphones. We're only starting to see the early innings of what could be possible with something like AirPods. But we're not there yet. The Apple Watch Series 7 is not competing with AirPods. It's not competing with iPhone or iPad. It's, of course, not competing with face wearables where Apple hasn't necessarily entered the market just yet. Instead, the Apple Watch Series 7 is about something new. It's about providing utility on the wrist, where a lot of people are just discovering what that even means. Whenever I talk about the Apple Watch, I like to bring up the topic of wrist real estate. We only have so much of it. With Apple Watch, Apple ended up placing one very big bet. It was a simple bet. People were underestimating, undervaluing wrist real estate. Watchmakers, jewelry makers, they were selling something else on the wrist, intangibles. They really weren't selling utility. The Apple Watch is something different. 6 years after the Apple Watch went on sale, we see Apple continue on that original path, adding utility on the wrist, slowly but surely giving the Apple Watch the job of handling additional tasks that we may have given the iPhone or iPad, an entirely new task. The Apple Watch Series 7 is going to end up being another successful step forward for Apple in terms of adding utility to the wrist. As I wrap this episode up, I did want to mention, if you have some thoughts about the Apple Watch, leave them in the comments section. Are you a longtime Apple Watch wearer? Are you still hesitant to embrace the Apple Watch? Even though it's been around for a number of years, I still think of the Apple Watch as a new product category. So I'm always interested to hear what others think of the device. For more information on Apple, its products, its business strategy, its financials, check out my website, aboveavalon.com. I have articles, podcast episodes. I also write daily updates for members. Those contain all of my analysis and perspective. I'm also available on Twitter at Neil Cybart, so definitely reach out if you ever have any questions. With that, I will conclude this episode. I will talk to you all later.